Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. Today, I'm going to be talking about losing yourself in a relationship. And this is something that I see a lot, especially in my clinical work, working with clients. And it's something that can happen, pretty much very fast in a relationship if you're not careful, especially if it's in your relational template. If you've seen a lot of overextending or people pleasing in your family of origin, or maybe that might have been elements of behavior that was modeled for you, or maybe that was how you felt connected or got some sort of connection in your life growing up is by being available or overextending, then you might be more predisposed to doing this in your intimate relationships or when you're dating. So why I wanted to talk about this is I see very intelligent, very successful people, totally lose sight of themselves in a relationship, like overlook what they bring to the table, all the fucking things that they've worked so hard to create in their life, their success, their identity, having a life that they really enjoy that they've built. And then as soon as somebody comes on the scene, that all goes out the fucking window. They stop looking after themselves. They start to define themselves solely by this person that they're meeting. They become over accommodating, overextending, tolerating all sorts of bullshit. And then ultimately feeling like it's not enough, and then being anxious and worrying about whether or not the person, is going to stay with them. They don't feel valued, don't feel appreciated, don't feel respected, don't feel like they're getting any of their needs met, and yet feel really powerless and stuck in this trap. And it's terrible. It is. It's really, really terrible. And there's obviously ways that you can work your way through this, but I wanted to talk about some of the things they look out for. Especially in the very early stages, if you're meeting somebody, or even this might resonate with you now, if you've maybe been feeling like this in your relationship, you might have been going out with your partner for a while. And I think it's really important to have this balance, um, or to create it where possible. But basically, you have to reconnect back to who you are at your core. The things that make you you, your sense of self, your identity, the things that you like doing, your interpersonal relationships, the people, places, and situations that you enjoy experiencing in life, making time for that. Now, that could be as simple as making time to go to the gym a couple of times a week. It could be catching up with your friends once a week. It could be making time to see your family, whether with your partner or on your own. It could be, just maintaining those things that help you feel connected to your sense of self. So like for me, for example, if I didn't make time for training, or I wasn't going to BJJ, or wasn't like just doing things that really helped me feel connected to myself, like maybe playing guitar or whatever it was, and I totally threw that out the window when I was meeting my partner. Say I just dropped everything. I only did what they wanted to do. I constantly made myself available. I would drop my plans. I would move things around, or I wouldn't make plans, and I would just hang about waiting for this person to contact me. Then that would be really, really dysregulating and a bit destabilizing as well. And it's rooted in this fear of, I want to be available for this person. I want this person to choose me. I want them to be around me. I want to spend time with me. And the thing is, you end up neglecting yourself. You end up neglecting your self care. Your interpersonal relationships can sometimes suffer as well. You might spend less time with your family. You might spend less time with your friends. We'll say in an ideal situation, these are all really good support networks that you have. And you can lose sight of your hopes and goals and aspirations and the things that you actually were looking to work towards, the things that were important to you prior to this person coming on the scene. That's what I'm saying. It could even be really, really minor. Like that weekly coffee date that you might have had with your best friend, that might have got neglected. It could be, carving out that time to go to the yoga studio or go to the gym or even get out a walk once in the morning. They listen to your podcast, whatever it is that you do. But that might all got neglected. It might all got put to the on the back burner. Or it could even have been, that health and fitness craze that you were on where you're starting to eat good and look after yourself, because maybe you've noticed your mental health's better when you're in a routine and you've got structure and you're eating better, you're getting hydrated, you've put back in caffeine and all this kind of crack. And now you've met this person and say maybe their values or their habits maybe don't align in some ways. Like they maybe drink at the weekend or eat takeaway or whatever the fuck it is, and you have completely compromised in this to the point where you're neglecting your own stuff. Now, I know these are all very minor things, and they can be sometimes part and parcel of like figuring stuff out in a new relationship. But when you completely neglect to ask for your basic needs to be met, to feel like you can do things for you or do things together as a couple because you're afraid of the person rejecting you, you're afraid of the person saying no, or you're afraid of compromising the relationship, then that's not good. And that's something that you have to tune into. And I would also say, like, at the very beginning of a relationship, especially if you're dating or You've been going out a while, it's important to have boundaries. It's so, so, so important to have boundaries. Like, start out as you mean to continue. You want to establish that foundation of respect in the beginning. And I think people are afraid of this attitude of, well, if I start to communicate boundaries very early on, then they might not like me and they might not reject, or they might reject me. And it's like, well, in that sense, they're kind of showing you that they're not prepared to meet you halfway and establish that kind of dual respect, that mutual respect for each other's limits and boundaries. And that's the thing, like, you're clinging to something then that's not maybe good for you, especially if you're very attracted to this person, or especially if you feel like, I hate this phrase, like you're punching and the person's really good looking and you feel really validated by them giving you attention and recognition. And that to me just indicates then that, again, you're losing sight of what you bring to the table in this scenario. You're not defined by that person liking you, and you don't have to completely neglect yourself or let go of everything just because you're attracted to this person or you feel validated by this person giving you a bit of time and attention. Your life's still important, your routine's still important. You deserve to be treated with respect. And that's the thing. We end up wearing a mask. We agree to things that we don't really want to agree to, or we compromise on things that we maybe shouldn't be compromising on. And that's the thing about like the boundaries, and especially your routine, like keeping that self-care routine in the beginning is so, so important, because you're starting out as you mean to continue, because you're not always going to be available. Sometimes you're going to need space to go and kind of decompress and do your own thing, because it's normal. You need it for your own self-care. You need it to be able to function. And also you want to kind of normalize having a bit of space in a relationship, because if the person's very full on, or they're very erratic, showing up out of the blue, or just demanding your time, or whatever, you will need to kind of establish boundaries around that. And I think the other thing about being congruent, it's a nice fancy way of just being really yourself, true to yourself, is that you're being upfront about what you expect from the beginning. And that's crucial. It's so, so important. You need to allow yourself to be seen for who you are. Now, I don't mean bare your fucking soul. I don't mean like, this is all my traumas and this is all the shit that I've been through, but like from a very grounded place. Be who you are, acknowledge the things that you like, that you don't like, the things you want to do, that you don't want to do, the things that, interest you. Don't be like molding yourself under this other person, especially, again, as I said, if you're very attracted and, you feel that validation from that person. Look, let them be with you or choose to be with you based on you being yourself. That is such an important foundation within a relationship, because you need to be chosen for who you are. And if you make yourself into something that you're not, you're going to resent it. And it's going to be hard to maintain that going forward. And that also feeds into this thing about using your voice, not only just to ask for what you want, but also to like speak up when things are wrong, or when the person's fucked you over, or, they've done something or said something that's maybe been hurtful, and observe them. Actually observe how they behave. Do they take responsibility? Can they hold their hands up and say, look, I'm sorry, I fucked up? Can they validate your emotions and your feelings? Do they get defensive? Do they behave in immature ways? Do they shout? Do they roar? Do they do things that kind of indicate red flags? Like, see the whole person. Don't just hold on to this fucking romanticized idea of who they could be, because you're not dating potential. You're dating the whole human being that's in front of you. And again, we've all got stuff. We've all got stuff we have to work on, but please just like tune on that in the very early stages. That's an indication of safety. So you need to be able to speak up. You need to be able to ask for what you want, but you also need to be able to address when something's not okay. Like, that's an important part of, a relationship. So get into the habit of normalizing this very early in the relationship. And if the person's got so much resistance to it, or they try and shut it down, or get angry, or try and make you feel guilty for speaking up, like, see this, acknowledge it for what it is. Don't ignore it. And that's also why I'm saying about like communicating your expectations around how you expect to be treated, like the amount of contact that you want to have. If you want the person to check in with you, if you want them to spend time with you, certain things that you just want to be able to do. And that can also come back to like intimacy, what you're comfortable with, what you're not comfortable with, speaking up about what it's like when you're around their friends, meeting their friends, meeting their family, all this kind of crack. You know, Allow yourself to speak up. And not everything has to be escalated like straight away. Give yourself some time to sit and think about it before you address it, but don't ignore it. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, even when you think about disrespect, right? Somebody taking you for granted, or keeping you a secret, for example, in their life, or hiding you away, or making demeaning remarks about your appearance, or like your friends, or your interests and stuff like that. Don't ignore that kind of thing. Like, really, really don't turn a blind eye to it. Also, don't allow yourself just to be taken for granted, so that you're always going to be available, you're always going to be accessible, you're always going to pay for shit, you're always going to be their go-to person. Like, that you're just there to kind of facilitate what they need from you. Like you're in this relationship as well. They have to meet you halfway. They have to show up for you. It should be a mutually beneficial and fulfilling experience. Um, and I suppose why I'm saying this as well is because some people, if they're getting all their needs met, but they're non-committal and they won't define what this is, then they've no incentive to do it because they're getting their needs met at your expense. And it's important if you're starting to feel invested and you're starting to like feel like you're falling in love with this person or connecting with this person, do not like shy away from that. Address it, speak to them, and this is what I'm saying about losing yourself in a relationship. If they're non-committal and they're fucking about or they're maybe messaging other people and you're invested and you're in that cycle, you can't stop thinking about them, but you just don't know what this is. You have to take control of that situation, lean into the conversation. Don't take a wishy-washy answer for granted. And also observe how they respond to that. Look at the kind of rationale they give you for it. If they're anyway kind of reluctant or hesitant, because there could be more going on that meets the eye. They might have other people on the go. They might be hiding you because they might be in another relationship. There could be all sorts of stuff that's going on. And I'm not saying that this is a rule of thumb, but it could be stuff that's going on. And again, this all comes back full circle to using your voice, not being afraid of this idea of, well, if I say it or I address this or I speak up or I communicate, I could potentially lose this relationship. Well, I mean, like, it's a possibility. It's also plausible that the person meets you halfway and acknowledges where you're coming from. It's also plausible that there's a bit of information here that you didn't have or that you didn't know that you needed. And that's the thing. If the only thing holding this relationship together, or this contact together, is you being compliant and placating and letting them have all their needs met at your expense, then you're not really in a fulfilling relationship. You're just getting breadcrumbs of what you could have from an actual healthy relationship. Um, what else did I want to say? So, like with expectations and stuff as well. Like part of that is also I mentioned space before, but like asking for quality time, not just when this person can fit you in. Then prioritizing loads of different things. Whether it's, and I mean this in a nice way, like not showing up after like 10 days or 2 weeks, like of just completely ignoring you, not prioritizing you, or constantly dropping you at the drop of the hat. They run off with the boys or whatever it is, or the gears or whatever. Having that like rooted in that there's a certain consistency to it, that you feel that they want to spend time with, that you feel appreciated, that you feel valued, that they want to be with you. And that's why it's so important in the very early stages of the relationship that you start out as that you mean to continue, because that is what's going to define the norm going forward. Boundary setting, like you have to establish that very early on, because that is what sets the tone. That is what lets the person know that there's going to be consequences for disrespect, that there's going to be consequences for treating you in a negative way, that you're not going to tolerate it. And if you don't follow through on that, then it actually undermines your credibility. It undermines the seriousness of what you're saying. And then that person really doesn't have an incentive to change. And this is why it's so important to work on your self esteem and your self worth, so that you don't find yourself tolerating these kinds of dynamics, and that you remember who the fuck you are. And I don't mean that in a conceited or arrogant way, but you're a fucking human being. You've got things to offer people. You want to be loved, you want to feel valued, you want to be connected, you want to have a fucking good experience with the person. So don't let them treat you in a bad way, but do not lose sight of yourself. Don't define yourself only by this person liking you or wanting you, or this idea that you're somehow more worthwhile because you have this person in your life. Like, you're inherently worthwhile. You're good. You're good enough as you are. You're not defined just by having a partner. And I think for some people, what can underpin this is they don't want to speak up and they don't want to do anything that will rock the boat potentially, because they're afraid of being on their own. And that, look, it's understandable. You might not have spent a lot of time on your own. You might have clung to relationships or friendships or situations that haven't served you because of that fear. But what's underneath that is you're not really learning how to self-regulate. You're not really learning how to attend to yourself. Like, once you're able to self-regulate and be comfortable on your own, like, that's what I'm saying about your quality of life. Your quality of life then becomes so much more grounded, because I've got all this shit going on in my life. I'm feeling good. I'm successful. I've got all this other elements in my life that are going well. You're able to discern, and I think that's a good key word for it. You're able to discern what this person's adding to your quality of life. Are they stressing me the fuck out? Do I feel better off with them in my life right now because we're going out? Do I feel better? How often am I like stressed out? Am I worrying? Am I anxious? Am I able to see this person for who they are, not who I think they should be or how I would like them to be? How do they treat me? How do I feel when I'm in their company? How do they show up for me? Are they making an effort? You're not looking at it from a different lens where you're just trying everything to make it work. You're able to look at it in a much more confident light because you're choosing it. You're not begging to be chosen. you're choosing. You've become the chooser in this dance instead of wanting just to be chosen. Now it's nice to be chosen. We all want to be chosen, but that we're not putting out that energy that can feel more empowered, more in control in that sense. And the thing is, like, in the very early stages, like when you're enamored with a person, it's not they say that if you're making yourself available or accessible, that that's a bad thing. You might be loved up, you might really enjoy spending time with this person, but it's just recognizing when you're overdoing it. Like I mentioned there earlier about overspending, like if you're constantly picking up the bill, if you're constantly gifting them, if you're constantly overdoing it and they're not even meeting you a fraction of the way, or it's taken for granted, they're not really appreciative of it. It's just worth recognizing. And again, if they're expecting you to drop things at the drop of the hat to be available or be accessible for them, that's just worth acknowledging. And the reason that I'm having this conversation is I see so many like really successful, really confident people fall into this trap, and it is rooted in like earlier life experiences, family of origin experiences, like negative things that have happened in the past. But it's also worth recognizing that when you've caught the pattern, you can see this in your relationships going forward that you can change it. It is going to take a bit of work. You're going to have to get out of your comfort zone. You're going to have to do things differently. And I like sometimes it might not work out. Sometimes the person might be a prick and they might be like, look, it's my way or the highway. And it's like, right, fucking see you later then, because you're not going to tolerate that going forward because you know the impact that this has on your mental health. You know the impact that it has on your sense of self, how distressing it can be, how overwhelming it can be when you're not eating and you're not sleeping and you can't get this person out of your head and you just want them to treat you like a fucking decent human being. And it's hard. It's hard when you're on it to kind of break that cycle. But as I said there about starting out as you mean to continue, it's about not defining your entire sense of self and your entire self worth by this person being in your life, or just because this person looks a certain way, or because maybe he's really get on when you're actually together, or maybe the fucking intimacy is really good, or whatever the fuck it is. But it's about recognizing that as a human being, you need so much more than just those bare basics. And that's about tuning into the self, really actually feeling about how is this making me feel? And also looking at your part on this, that you're not overlooking the blind spots about your self-care, that you're not neglecting yourself, that you're not overextending, that you're not neglecting your interpersonal relationships, your support network, that you haven't just dropped everything just to facilitate this relationship being maintained. And that's that other cycle too, where you become overly fixated on them, what they need, what they want, what they're doing. And it's just important. Like I feel like it's an important conversation to have. And I don't know that it's being discussed enough in that space, like online. So like I see it fairly regularly. And I just wanted to do a wee podcast on it today just to talk on it. And if this resonates with you, look, it's not they say that there's something like chronically wrong. It just means it's a pattern that's no longer serving you. It's probably been there for quite a long time. And you need to address it because it's not just going to change itself. And you might find yourself sitting waiting for this person, hopefully just for the penny to drop and for them to have a moment of realization where they're just going to suddenly treat you better. But like that's not the way life works. And we have to take personal responsibility. We have to instigate the change. We have to look at what we're doing and change our part in the dance in the hope that that person will at least try and work with us to create the change. And like, look, it's not always easy, especially if you've got a fear of being on your own and you're tolerating some bullshit. Like, the person might have been keeping you a secret in their life. You might have found out that they've got a partner, and like you might feel so fucking validated and connected by having this person in your life, but it's not. Like you have to look at the damage that this is also doing to you. You have to look at the impact of the stress that this is putting you through, and then look at it through the lens of, well, what can I actually control? What can I actually change? And some people will settle so much for so fucking damaging behavior and disrespectful treatment from partners or even people that they're dating because, maybe they haven't had a lot of success when they're dating, or maybe they feel like their confidence rock bottom, or maybe they've just come out of a really horrible relationship where the person's really affected their self-esteem or their sense of self-worth. And then they meet this person. It's just that continuation of the cycle. And maybe they are afraid of being on their own or they're never going to meet somebody. And there's all these real fucking deep rooted fears that make people cling to these damaging relationships. And what happens is then it forces you to settle for something that you know is not good for you. And look, there are some very clear signs that you could be settling. Like, you might tell yourself that you should stay with them just because, you think you should stay with them. You're worried about what it might be like to have to go back dating, going into the dating pool and all the fucking shit show that kind of encompasses. Or what if it doesn't work out? What if I don't meet anybody else? Or what if that person moves on before me and I'll never be able to get over it? Or, and that's the thing, like, you can keep yourself in that trap and nothing will change. And then it'll just keep going on and on and on. And the longer you're on it, the more it's unpacking your confidence, the more it's unpacking your mental health, your self esteem, the more it's unpacking your quality of life. And then you become a shell of yourself. And like it's you have to connect that back to the relationship. Like you can't just bury your head in the sand and think it's just going to be okay. Or you're just going to figure it out. Like because you have to take control of the situation and the choices that you're making. And the thing is, when you're doing your best to try and make this work, you're going to fucking rationalize this in a way that somebody on the outside won't. Like you'll find reasons to tolerate and put up with loads of other fucking nonsensical behavior. But then when you're actually maybe in a therapeutic session and you're talking about what's going on, you'll actually catch it for the first time. You'll be like, "What the actual fuck was I doing? Why did I allow that person to treat me that way? Why did I think that that was normal?" Because when you're in the container of the relationship and you're doing your best to make it work and you're afraid of being rejected or afraid of being on your own, you'll try and normalize all sorts of fucking bad behavior, all sorts of disrespectful behavior, and that's not okay. But it's coming back to like wanting this to work at all costs. And the thing is, like, on a level, you know, you can't be really fulfilled by that container or that relationship. Like, you know, it's not really what you want, but at the same time, you're afraid that you're not going to get anything else. Now, I don't want to be saying that this is generalized and it applies to everybody, but what I'm saying is, like, you have to see what way this person's treating you. You have to see the impact that this is having. You also have to see your part in this dance. Now, you might look at this person and think, look, we do have a lot in common. We do get on with each other. When we are together, we do have a bit of crack. But then there's all this other shit that happens where the person's really disrespectful, or there's a lot of secrecy, or I don't fucking trust them, or you know, they make these really demeaning remarks, or they're disrespectful. They don't show up for me, and like I know I'm rhyming off a lot of stuff, but this is sometimes how it can play out, and then that becomes normalized. And you're like, well, you know, you have to recognize that this is an aspect of who this person is. And if you haven't communicated boundaries or you haven't followed through on boundaries, then that person is going to keep doing what they're doing because they've no reason to not do it until you do something different on your end for the dance. And if you get fixated on this idea of who they could be as opposed to who they are and how they're choosing to behave consistently, then that's that trap you fall into where you're dating somebody for this idea of their potential, who they could be, and you're basically trying to will yourself and they stay in the hope that they might get their shit together, that they might stop disrespecting you, that they might start caring about you if you just keep giving them more and more and more and being accessible and being nice and being good to them. But like giving them more of what they're already not appreciating it isn't going to jog them and they just suddenly doing a 180 and just starting to treat you good. It's like it's not that's not really going to do it because you know you're already being disrespected, your needs are being ignored and disregarded. That is even if you've communicated them. And the thing is, the person's not really factoring you into like the impact of their behavior on the how that's affecting you, you know, and that speaks volumes. You have to really, really sit with that as well. Um, and I know the big one that I mentioned earlier is the safety. Like the safety is such a big thing, and like I say this a lot when I'm talking about even just relationships in general. You need to be able to communicate. You need to be able to ask for what you want. You need to be able to have that safety and contain in the container that you can share your thoughts and your feelings openly without thinking about being ridiculed or rejected or that person being demeaning or even just being aggressive or just a fucking nasty or whatever it is. And like, look, conflict even too. Like, you know, I've seen this recently, like with stonewalling and silent treatment. It's one thing for somebody to need a bit of space, like a few hours just to get their head right or go out a walk, but at least communicate. Look, we'll come back and we'll talk this later. Somebody going on these silent treatment and punishing you for hours or days on end. And look, there is a spectrum of behavior out there. This can go on for weeks in some cases. That's punishing and it's trying to moderate behavior. It's trying to get somebody to feel guilty. It's trying to get somebody to become compliant. And that is a really fucking unhealthy, toxic behavior. And the thing is, if you're caught in that trap, you need to see this for what this is. You need to actually recognize, look, okay, healthy relationships, people have conflict, they have disagreements, and they have argue. They're not always going to get their communication right. Things are going to go tits up, but at the core of this, they do love, value, and respect each other. There is a willingness to learn. There's a willingness to be open. There's a willingness to acknowledge that, look, sometimes we hurt each other's feelings. And there's an effort there to make amends. There's an effort there to apologize and make a repair. And the thing is, it's very clear that they're committed to the relationship. It's very clear that they're committed to growth and working with you for this to be a mutually fulfilling experience. And if that's not the case of what you're experiencing this pair, it's all about this person and what this person wants and can get, then look, it's not fucking good. And that's why I'm saying it's not easy to look at what our part in this dance is, especially if you're in it and your whole fixation is on this person. You can't lose sight of who you are. And if this is resonating with you, what I would tell you to do is look, it's not fucking easy to sit in this place and be like, right, well, I'm here now. What the fuck am I going to do? But if somebody's constantly letting you down, breaking promises, being hot and cold, inconsistent, the communication's terrible, or it's really, really fucking toxic and demeaning, or, you find that the relationship is really being, what's the word I'm looking for? Exploitative, that you have no sense of self, you've got no personal space, all your relationships are becoming neglected, you don't trust the person, you don't feel like you can actually get what you want from the relationship, or you feel like the burden is on you to make this work. Then look, the only way that's going to change is if you take control of your part within that. You have to look at, well, why am I choosing this? At the core of this, getting help from a professional to work on your confidence, your sense of self, your self-esteem, your self-worth, looking at your conditioning, understanding your attachments, understanding your coping and your communication, looking at the conditioning that's fed into this, actually starting to work on that, like working on your identity. And everything I said there at the beginning, like, whether or not you have the confidence to walk away from that relationship, or if the container has the capacity to change, if the person's going to work with you, all the things this is at the beginning are still so fucking vitally important. Maintaining your self-care is such a fucking crucial thing. Like having a routine, having those interpersonal relationships, having the support network, having your own hopes, goals, ambitions, dreams, aspirations, allowing yourself to use your voice, setting those boundaries in the very, very beginning, and look, if it doesn't work out in the early stages, when you're 100% authentically yourself, using your voice, communicating your needs, um, and showing up authentically in that early stage, and it doesn't work out, then that's okay. It's not fucking ideal, but it's not okay, because you've laid the foundation in a really important way. And I would choose that 100 times, like 100 times. I would prefer to be rejected for who I am, for that person not wanting to meet me halfway, for that person not wanting to respect my boundaries. They're doing me a fucking favor, because I'm like, right, this isn't going to be a fucking uphill battle. I'm not going to get fucked over. I'm not going to get exploited. I'd rather be with the person that's choosing me for me, that wants to be with me, that values my time, that values my energy, that wants to spend quality time with me, but also recognizes that we've got this mutually beneficial agreement where we're going to respect each other's need for space, boundaries, the lifestyle and everything else, that I can feel safe enough to be myself with you, that I can communicate what I want and need. And then obviously that filters onto different things, different areas of life and stuff. But anyway, I hope that wasn't too much of a rant. And if this has resonated with you, I would please, please, please encourage you to do something about it. Either get in touch with me, get in touch with a mental health professional, or somebody that works in that space. Because look, I fucking love this work, and I am very, very honored and privileged to work with the people that I get to work with. And nothing makes me buzz more in life than seeing the changes that people make when they come out of this space. But nothing will change if nothing changes, if you don't take that urgency and personal responsibility to go, look, I've had enough. Like, I've had enough of this now, and I need help. And you don't have to figure it out all on your own. Reach out to somebody and just get that ball rolling. Um, and I could obviously spend a lot more time talking about this, and I will expand on this in future episodes. And I just want to acknowledge, like, I was aiming to get one of these out a week, but just the last couple of weeks have been a bit crazy, just with work and that, and then traveling. So I do apologize if anybody was waiting for like regular podcasts. I am going to be so much more consistent going forward. If there's any other topics that you're really keen to listen to, or if you've got any thoughts on certain things, just shoot me a DM. You can get me on social media, or you can get me on my website, any of those places. I just want to say thanks again for listening.